We coming into the end of Sefer Shemot, and it's the end of the whole book, and it's usually there's two parshiot, Vayakel and Pekudei, and they usually or often read together. But before we get into the parsha, as I like to do, I just want to read the Hayom Yom for today. And I thought that it was really interesting because last week we spoke about the value of being truthful and the midah of emet, truthfulness. And actually, if you look at the Aleph base, the first letter of the Aleph base is Aleph, the middle letter is Mem, and the last letter is Taf. So the word emet encompasses the whole Aleph base. And it's a good word that one should attempt to base one's life on. And we had an interesting discussion at our Shabbos table. What does it mean to be truthful and to really be authentically you? So we spoke about that last week, but in this week, tonight's and tomorrow's Hayom Yom is again about truth. And it says, my father says, truth is the middle path. An inclination to the right, to be over stringent with oneself and find faults or sins not in accord with the truth. An inclination to the right, to be over stringent with oneself and find faults or sins is not in accord with the truth. Or an inclination to the left, to be overly indulgent, covering one's faults or being lenient in demands of avoda out of self-love. Both these ways are false. And it's interesting just to think about, in terms of the wordings here, that the right and the left, the right, holding on to rules is a good thing, and holding on to tradition is a good thing, and holding on to holding oneself to a standard is good. But if we're too strict about that and too gevuradik on ourselves, then we self-flagellate and become perfectionistic, and that's really not a great thing. And on the other hand, if it's all about indulgence and self-love and leniency, too much leniency in the name of self-love, so that's also not a true way. That the way of truth is this middle path that takes account of the rules, takes account of trying to do things the right way, but not to a point of too harsh, not to the point of an unforgiving attitude. On the other hand, the leniency can't be self-indulgent, because that's no good either. So I just thought that was interesting. And it's interesting, we're coming into the Parsha, and even though it's a double Parsha, each piece of the double Parsha has its own identity and its own personality, so to speak. So Parshas Vayakel is, Susan, I see a question.
Yeah, just when you're talking about the right and the left and being polarized, and I found it fascinating. I don't know if anyone noticed that the cover of the On Me this week was Mark Levin. You ever listen to Mark Levin?
I listen to him on the radio sometimes.
Yeah, that he has a Chabad rabbi he learns with every Friday that he's home with. I couldn't believe it, because he's very stringent and extreme in his views and harsh. And I never thought he would be open to it. He really is seeing and feeling truth. And the article was very good. Just wanted to share that.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. So, so coming into Parshas Vayakel, if one reads the Jonathan Sachs essay from the latest book that he published, which is just one essay per Parsha, he starts off and he talks about our generation, which we all know is iPhone, there's iPhone,
iPad.
iPad, all the I's, iPhone,
I
iPad, etc., etc. Great emphasis in our generation on self-growth, self-fulfillment, working out our own issues, really good. He said that when he went to the bookstore, that's his local bookstore, the shelf of religion is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the shelf on self-help is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And he was speaking in his essay about this preoccupation with self and how it's such a theme of our times, and yet as oneself, as an independent person, we can only go so far. And I'm sure, we're living in this time of Corona where we've been so much isolated from other people. And in a way, it's good to go inward and find our own strengths and get to know ourselves and get to know our strengths and our weaknesses and develop a personal relationship with Hashem and our own neshama. That's really very nice and good. But even in the shir, when we can share with each other and say our truths to each other and be even a small community that we are in the class, the value of community. And it's interesting that this parsha takes place when Moshe has been petitioning Hashem to forgive the Jewish people, and he comes down right after the day of Yom Kippur, and he speaks and he gathers the people, and in his gathering of the people, there's somehow a healing because everyone was very destroyed. The community was kind of in crisis. There was the whole Chet HaEgel disaster. And then Moshe pleads on their behalf. And then when he's going to start talking to them again, there's this gathering of community. The Talmud tells the story of Rebbe Yochanan, who, interestingly enough, was a great healer. And he was able to heal anyone with just a touch of his hand, which is a beautiful thing. Now I want to know more about Rebbe Yochanan. Who was he that he could channel into this great path of healing? But when he himself got sick, he couldn't heal himself, and Reb Chanina had to come and heal him. And this is, one can ask this, to any teacher or any healer right now, how come you can't heal yourself? And there's, I don't know if this is a direct quote from the Talmud, but a prisoner cannot release himself from prison. That in order for a person to heal themselves, there has to be something bigger, something higher, something other than you in your individuality. And of course, in our times right now, the community aspect is sort of falling apart. People are very individualistic. There's the effort to build their individuality, have, your own screen, you can customize your own news feed so that you only get news that actually stays with what you're already convinced about, nothing to change your opinions. It can be a very singular path. And yet the Torah is, in this week's Parsha, the Vayakel, is the importance of gathering into a community. And when they gather into the community, that's when they can build a mishkan, they can have a project, they can work together. And it's interesting that there's a little insight that when they gathered, that's the only time that they weren't complaining. Really, when they were building the mishkan, they were completely given over to this task, and all their bickering and moans and groans are somehow absent for the time that they are building the Mishkan. So if we're reading into the Parsha, and we start with the first line in the Parsha, Vayakel Moshe, and he gathered, et kol edat b'nei Yisrael, all of the assembly of b'nei Yisrael, vayome elehem, and he says to them, Ele hadvarim asher tziva Hashem la'asos osam. These are the things which Hashem has commanded you to do them. And then here's a really interesting line. Sheishis yamim ta'aseh malacha.
Kiddush.
Yes, it's in Kiddush. 6 days, ta'aseh malacha, work shall be done. The formation of the word, or the grammar of the word is ta'aseh, is sort of a passive way of saying the verb, saying the verb. But 6 days, work shall be done. And it shall be done. It shouldn't not be done. It shall be done. Yom HaShvi'i, and on the 7th day, Yihi Lachem, it should be to you Kodesh, Shabbos, Shabbaton, a holy. It should be holy for you. La Hashem Kol Ha'oseh Bo Malacha, you must. And if you do work on this day, you will be put to death. It's pretty clear. It's something that you do not want to be doing. So, and then it tells us you shouldn't light a fire, and then it goes back to talking about the Mishkan and the building of the Mishkan and all of the work of the Mishkan and all the instructions to create this sanctuary for Hashem's presence in the lower world. So the fact that Shabbos comes in such a strong wording about Shabbos, so we've taught traditionally many times that as much as it's important to do your work, and the building of the Mishkan is symbolic of all work. We know it's divided into 39 categories, the Mishkan work, so that defines what we're not allowed to do on Shabbos, the 39 categories of work. We can't be creative in the way that the Mishkan is, and the Mishkan is creative in such a powerful way that it literally parallels Hashem's creation of the world. That just as Hashem created the world, so Moshe instructs the Jewish people to create this Mishkan, and it's kind of a whole exercise in creativity from our point of view as opposed to Hashem creating the world. There are a lot of beautiful parallels of Hashem creating the world, and then we instructed to create the Mishkan. But the part that I wanted to focus on is more the idea of Shabbos and how to experience Shabbos, and experiencing Shabbos as a teaching of how to experience every day and every moment. So I will be quoting from this book that I've often quoted from before, from Yaakov Nagin, Be Become Bless, Jewish Spirituality Between East and West. And he has a beautiful essay on Shabbos. And the essay on Shabbos is interesting because he's talking about Shabbos, and he's quoting Rebbe Nachman, and he's quoting Rav Kook, but it's really an essay on mindfulness in the fullest sense of the word, because the idea of Shabbos being in the here and now, that once you come into Shabbos, to be fully present to that Shabbos and not be attached to what you were doing before Shabbos, and not be attached to what you're going to do after Shabbos, and how this is not just a teaching for how to live life. Sorry, it's not just a teaching on how to keep Shabbos, but a teaching on how to live life. And I want to go into the essay with you because it's just, it's really so beautiful. So he says, if the purpose of the spiritual search is to awaken the seeker, the implication is that spiritually, most people are sleepwalking through life. So we're going to talk about what it means to be asleep and what it means to be really awake. Not woke, but awake. Thank you for laughing at that joke. Yeah. So sleep in this sense means a lack of awareness of life, stemming largely from the manner in which consciousness flits between past and future, between thoughts of what was and of what will be. It is only when one succeeds in concentrating and being present in the moment that one can awaken. So if we think that the purpose of all of life and the purpose of really our avoda is to prepare ourselves for the coming of Mashiach, which is to prepare ourselves for being completely awake, like we say in Shahamalot, that, we will look back and we'll think we were just dreaming, because once we fully come into messianic times or messianic headspace or messianic consciousness, we'll think that the rest of our life we were sleeping. So if you want to practice for being in a messianic place, so you want to be awake right now and practice waking up, practice being fully awake. So there's a story in the Zen tradition about a disciple who asked his master the way, to show him the way to nirvana or to enlightenment or to, coming to bliss or coming to nirvana comprehension, da'as, really getting with the program, however you want to call it. So the teacher replied, and I love, love, love this answer. The teacher replied, through food and sleep. Through food and sleep. So if I'd ask you, what do you think this means? So I'm interested in hearing a couple answers. What does it mean? You come to full awakenedness through food and through sleep. So does anyone want to volunteer a suggestion of what that means?
Well, some people, like, you think of the monks, where they fast all day and silence all day and isolation all day. That might be a level of holiness to some, but to raise essential things for life, we have to sleep, we have to eat, to a higher level, that's really living in this world and raising it. Otherwise, it's is it real to
Right.
be in a cave and fast and be in silence and pray all day?
Right. So the eating is part of being in this world, and sleeping.
Oh, that's cool.
Is also,
We're otherworldly. No?
Well, it's otherworldly. So I'll read it inside because it's very poetic. So the answer puzzled the student. After all, don't all people eat and sleep? But the master explained the difference. When he eats, it is he who eats. And when he sleeps, it is he who sleeps. Now I'll explain to you what I mean by this. We had a discussion on Friday night, as I said at the beginning of class, about what does it mean to be true, to be honest. So my husband told this very famous story about a person who was trying to do avodas Hashem, and he decided that in order to do avodas Hashem, he has to fast. He's going to fast from Shabbos to Shabbos. So he's fasting, and on Monday he's thinking about his food, and he's thinking, but he kind of doesn't give in. And on Tuesday he doesn't give in, and on Wednesday he almost gives in, and on Thursday he doesn't give in, and on Friday he almost gives in, but he doesn't. And he finally comes to Shabbos, and he comes to the Rebbe, and he wants the Rebbe to be so proud of him that the Rebbe, should pat him on the back that he fasted, the whole week. And what the Rebbe says to him is, I think the sentence was that he's like a patchwork quilt. And I like this answer very much. What does it mean he's a patchwork quilt? So what do you think that could mean? A patchwork quilt. What could that mean? And I know Susan's answering, but is there anybody else out there who wants to answer? See, here's the tricky part. When you put your graphic on and then you go do cooking or something, and then the teacher asks a question, then that's when you get caught out. So what's the difference between a real quilt and or a regular quilt and a patchwork quilt? What's the difference?
I don't know how he means it in terms of the person, but a patch, like a real quilt, you're kind of doing one piece. A patchwork, you're putting together different kind of cloths and putting it like sort of, maybe more meaningful by doing it with little patches and little pieces, and kind of doing it as you go rather than have like a set plan. But I'm not sure how he refers to, this person.
Yeah, so definitely you're on the right track with the little pieces, but I think like the answer here of the Zen master, when you eat, it's he who eats. When he sleeps, it's he who sleeps. If you're fasting, fast. If you're going back and forth and you're struggling and you kind of really your whole head is this place and this place, you got to the end, but you weren't shalem with what you were doing. So he wanted the Rebbe to give him a big pat on the back, but the Rebbe really called him out on not being shalem with what he was doing. He was in, he was out. Yes, he was struggling, but he was doing it in little pieces as opposed to like being beshalom with what he was doing. So the capacity to bring absolute presence to every action brings one in contact with existence and forges a connection to the essence of life. That bond is the awakening that we so learn for. So the idea is to be fully present with your eating, be fully present with your sleeping. If you're fasting, try to be fully present and fully one with the fast. Don't be like a patchwork quilt. But how does that come into Shabbos? Because this is really, I think, such a profound teaching on how to do Shabbos in the right way. And if we can learn it through tonight and we can really get it, that we all understand it, I think it can really transform one's experience of Shabbos forevermore. So Rebbe Nachman says, when we talk about sleep and being awake, it's a general a general lack of consciousness is sleep. Sleep is the departure of awareness. There are people who while away their days in sleep, for the essence of animation is the mind, and one must be awakened from one's slumber. Okay, so now the whole thing is to be present and focus on the present moment in which one exists, because the following day is entirely new world. And the day that passed, it's over, right? We say this often in yoga class also. Learning to wake up is an important lesson, to be present in life, in the moment, to treat existence with respect and not let it pass us by. So in Likutei Moharan, Rebbe Nachman says the following. And Moshe says, eat that today, for today's a Shabbos to Hashem. Each of the three meals is described as today, to suggest that one is only to dine at a Shabbos meal for the sake of that day. For there are times when one eats because one has been hungry yesterday, or not to be hungry tomorrow. But at each of the three Shabbos meals, one must eat only for the sake of that day, meaning that those meals are not are for the present, meaning that those meals are right for right now, not for the past or for the future. So that's like an interesting idea, and I'm sure that you know about it, but if you're eating your Su'adah Shlishi because you're going to be going out that night and you want, be able to have a snack, you're going to have a very busy Motzei Shabbos. I'm not sure if you do that anymore. By the time Shabbos is finished, I'm usually ready for kind of time in. But let's say you've got a whole, evening planned. Don't eat your meal on Su'adah Shlishi so that you could have energy for your Motzei Shabbos. I think this is a beautiful training in being present to the moment. And then there's more. According to Rebbe Nachman, eating on Shabbos connects us to a more profound stratum of reality, allowing us to cleave to holiness. And I know that maybe you've heard many times that what you eat on Shabbos doesn't add calories, but I've never heard it said, the injunction to eat a lot on Shabbos. Rebbe Nachman says it really strongly. He says, on Shabbat, one must literally consume copious amounts of food and drink, for anything consumed on Shabbat is pure divinity and pure holiness. Wow. Being in the present, Rebbe Nachman says, not only awakens us, but enables an experience of intimacy with Hashem. So not only are we supposed to eat with an awareness that we are not eating because, you know, we were hungry the day before, and now it's a tricky halacha, because you're not supposed to eat a lot on Friday so that you come into Shabbos being hungry. And so you eat on Shabbos because you're hungry, but you're not eating like chas v'shalom, like the Holocaust people. The Holocaust people, that's a really not nice way to say it. Survivors, sometimes they worry that they're going to be hungry, so they're eating not to be hungry. So don't eat with that consciousness, but eat for the pleasure that you're getting in the moment, you know, at that moment that you're eating. Okay, so the idea that Shabbos is a day of presence and being in the moment, so that's a really beautiful thing. Not being in the past, not being in the future. And listen to this. This is another beautiful quote. It says, the Talmud states that long strides diminish a man's eyesight by 500th part. So 1/500 long strides are going to diminish your eyesight. So we'll define what exactly it means by long strides. What is the remedy? The remedy is that this 1/500th of your eyesight can be restored by drinking the Kiddush wine. So Rabbi Yaakov Nagain said he heard an explanation on this piece from the Talmud from a Rabbi Alan Schwartz, which he quotes that Rabbi Schwartz said that long strides refers to the rat race, like the endless running and pursuing and trying to get, you know, keep moving. That diminishes the eyesight, prevents us from truly seeing life. But the antidote would be Kiddush, the Shabbos, the presence of being fully in the moment and being right here, right now. So, and then there's another piece, and this piece is from Rav Kook, which is a further enhancement of the idea of be in the here and now and practice on being mindful in the moment. This is really beautiful teaching from Rav Kook. It says, holiness is a quality that transcends every process, so that there's no need to say that a saintly person eats in order to learn Torah or in order to pray or perform mitzvot, for that is but a middling trait. In other words, to eat in order to pray well, do mitzvahs, or do something, that's a middling trait. Rather, the eating itself, as well as speaking and all of the processes and the feelings of life, are suffused with holiness and light. In other words, don't make your eating just for the sake that it's going to give you the chance to do a mitzvah or learn Torah later. While you're eating, you are connecting to the holiness of life. Hashem infused godliness into every little thing that you're eating. So be present to the eating for its own sake. So according to Rav Kook, when food is consumed as a means to an end, no matter how virtuous, it is an expression of a middling trait. True holiness can only be attained when one recognizes the spiritual value of eating, not only the indirect benefit that it occasions. Again, our consciousness should be wholly directed to the action we are engaged in at a given moment. So I think this is really beautiful. And then Rav Kook says, Hashem's radiant light, which permeates all of the worlds, animating them and saturating them with the sustenance of supernal bliss from the source of life, infuses all souls and angels, all creatures, with the strength to discern the inner aspect of the sense of life. This very poetic, and elsewhere I've seen in Rebbe Nachman's teachings that every object has a life force in it, a mystery in it, and it's our duty almost to try and connect to that life force of all the things that we engaged with, the food we eat, I guess the objects we fill our house with, the things we surround ourselves with, that everything has divine energy, and to be mindful about everything that we're eating and engaging with. Our sense of life issues from the radiant light of Hashem that suffuses all of reality. So that is why all of the processes and feelings of life were suffused with holiness and light. When we contemplate the processes and feelings of our lives, we touch life itself, and through its life source, Hashem. So I think that's pretty amazing that it says also, Rav Kook talks about the ecstatic experience of the supernal holiness of eating. And Rebbe Nachman has many teachings focusing on one's encounter with the holy within the material realm. So I think this is pretty awesome. There's one more paragraph that I want to read, and then we can talk a little bit about it, because maybe we thought that mindfulness training is a teaching that comes from other cultures, and here we have all these teachings from our own teachers talking to us about being mindful with what we're doing at the moment, and specifically on Shabbat, how we should be eating each meal for that moment, being in the moment, connecting with every aspect of our environment in the moment. And I'll just read you one more paragraph from Orot HaTeshuvah. At the dawn of creation, the taste of the tree was also worthy of being like the taste of its fruit. All means that enhance an exalted universal spiritual process were worthy of being perceived through a spiritual sense, at the same high level of exaltedness and blissfulness with which we conceive of the goal. But due to the nature of the earth, only the taste of the fruit of the final process, the ultimate ideal, is perceived with its blissfulness and splendor. But in the world to come, days will come when creation will resume its original state, and the taste of the tree will be like the taste of the fruit. In other words, in Gan Eden, the tree and the fruit had a beauty and a taste and a magic and a wonder. And then because we fell and all of creation fell, now we only have capacity to enjoy the fruit, but the tree itself, it's not that compelling to eat. But in the world to come, everything will be more infused and more vibrant with life force, and we'll be able to enjoy each and every aspect of creation in a sort of a heightened state, in a heightened fashion. So I don't know if you want to comment on that before I just say the last little thing, and then maybe I'll say the last little thing, and then we can talk about everything and all things. Just the other part that I wanted to focus in on the Parsha was the fact that when Moshe finishes telling them that they need to build the Mishkan, but only once they've understood that they can't do this building on Shabbos, and he starts asking everybody to make their donations, he says it in a very beautiful way, and this phrase I've spoken about when we've learned before, but he says, in Pasuk Hey, it says, Kachu mi'itchem truma, take from yourselves a portion, an offering, and then it says, Lashem, kol nidiv libo, everybody who is generous of heart. And throughout the building of the Mishkan and the comments around that, there are many statements around this opening, this willing heart, the giving heart, the heart that is motivated. And it's just interesting that in Egypt, we had Paro with his heart closed, and the closed heart and the stubborn heart. And then here we have the Mishkan, and it has to be, all the offerings have to be from a giving and an open heart. And that, that's really how we want to be in the world. We want to be giving and contributing to our Mishkan in a giving way and in an open-hearted way. And just to conclude with the teaching from Reb Nosson, quoting Rabbi Nachman, he says, as I've said many times in this class, and I've quoted many times, that after the Chet HaEgel, Moshe was able to help each person find their Nakuda Tova, the part of them that wasn't damaged through the whole mess of the Chet HaEgel, the part of them that was ready to do tshuva, the good part, the undamaged part, and he extracted that from them, and that's what enabled them to give to the Mishkan. And Reb Nosson says that's actually what they gave. They gave of their goodness, they gave their Nakuda Tova in each of its individual fashion to contribute to the Mishkan. But then Reb Nosson says an amazing thing. He says, whenever we are in a community, Vayakel, community, whenever we are in a community and we can see each other's good points and we can help to bring it out, then we actually construct a Mishkan of everybody's good space, everybody's good points. And in whatever space we are, when we're extracting that Nakuda Tova from others, that enables us to create a virtual Mishkan, or a Mishkan that's ongoing and ever present and not connected necessarily to the Mishkan that they built in the Midbar, but a Mishkan of consciousness that we create when we contribute our Nakuda Tova, when we look and appreciate the good in other people and draw it out so that it can become something that we pull together, acknowledge and acknowledge and embrace, and then we build up a Mishkan wherever we are, in whichever fashion we are. So welcome to Suri.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just basically